Last night I went to a hearing in Brooklyn at the Brooklyn Museum about the proposed hikes in our fares for the buses and subways and the proposals to cut back some of the service, particularly in buses that are the lifeline for many, many New Yorkers. What was extraordinary about this public hearing was not that it would change anything, because this is a done deal and the MTA is frankly not very responsive to the public needs, and besides that is a bloated bureaucracy that is one of the most inefficient transit authorities that I've seen in the country. But really what was extraordinary was the protests on the part of the kids outside the Brooklyn Museum, because one of the proposals is to eliminate the MetroCards for school kids. And it was pretty clear from listening and talking to some of these kids that this was their lifeline, that this meant whether they get to school or not, because for many kids coming from working class families and poor families, the added cost of paying for those MetroCards is hundreds and hundreds of dollars a year. The real bigger question here is a question of priorities. The fact is that the reason the MTA says it's in a crisis, putting aside the bloated salaries of top management, is because in the state we don't have a governor who has exercised leadership on what it means to have a decent society and to ask people to pay their fair share. The fact is that we would not be facing this crisis in transit, not to mention other services in the state, if the governor had stepped up to the plate and asked the wealthiest people in the state to pay their fair share. One of the troubles that we have in this state, and frankly it's happening all across the country, is that the elite, the top 1%, have essentially removed themselves from responsibility of helping us have a functioning society. If we actually had a progressive taxation system in this state, in New York, that resembled something that we had in the 1970s, 95% of the people would get a tax cut and only 5% would be asked to pay a little more, and we would have somewhere between $8 or $9 billion more in revenues in the state, which would make it possible for those kids to get their MetroCards. Something is not right in our state. If I'm the United States Senator, I'm not going to let that happen.